Hey man, there's a strange kind of power in being the chapter she skipped, the one she didn't take the time to understand, the one she rushed past because she thought something better was waiting ahead. But what she never realizes until it's too late is that some chapters don't just build a story, they define it. You were that chapter, the one that would have changed her, the one that could have brought depth, growth, and meaning to her life. But she was too impatient to see it, too addicted to the illusion of more. And when a woman like that walks away, she never walks into peace, she walks into noise. At first it feels exciting, new conversations, fresh attention, a dopamine rush. But after that high fades, what's left is emptiness. Because what she left behind wasn't just a man, it was her mirror, the version of herself she could have evolved into if she had stayed. You see, women rarely regret losing men who blend in, but they always regret losing men who stood out, the ones who forced them to face their reflection, to confront their patterns, to grow beyond emotional impulsiveness. And that's the kind of man you were. You weren't perfect, but you were rare. You had direction when others drifted, patience when others panicked, silence when others begged. You were consistent in a world built on convenience. You didn't play the game, you understood it. You didn't chase, you observed. And that stillness, that strength, that quiet self-assurance, it made her feel something unfamiliar, something unsettling. Because deep down, she knew she couldn't manipulate you the way she did with others. You were the first man who didn't bend when she tested you. And that's exactly why she ran. Not because you weren't enough, but because you were too real for the fantasy she wanted to live in. When a woman leaves a man like that, she doesn't walk away into happiness, she walks into confusion. At first, she'll convince herself she's healing, that she's focusing on herself. She'll go out, post stories, surround herself with distractions, and act like she's unbothered. But deep down, something inside her will start whispering, "You made a mistake." She won't admit it, not yet, because regret never shows up immediately. It waits. It waits until her new reality starts falling apart, until the attention she gets starts to feel shallow, until she realizes that all the validation in the world can't replace the peace of being with a man who made her feel safe, not by words but by presence. That's when it hits her. That's when she starts revisiting that skipped chapter, not with curiosity, but with longing. And that's where most men ruin the story, by trying to remind her of what she lost, by reaching out, posting for attention, or showing her how happy they are without her. But here's the truth, brother. The man she regrets the most isn't the one who tries to prove a point. It's the one who disappears into purpose, the one who lets time do the talking. Because while she's scrolling through meaningless noise, your silence becomes magnetic. She starts to wonder what you're doing, who you're becoming, whether you even think about her anymore. That mystery eats away at her ego. And the longer you stay silent, the louder that regret becomes. Because she realizes that while she was chasing momentary excitement, you were quietly becoming everything she was too blind to appreciate. Here's the thing, most women won't admit, they don't miss the man, they miss the feeling the man gave them. You gave her stability when her world was chaos. You gave her patience when she didn't deserve it. You gave her love that wasn't transactional, validation that wasn't cheap, attention that wasn't desperate. But when she walked away, she thought she'd find that feeling somewhere else. Maybe in another man, maybe in a distraction, maybe in self-discovery. And now she's learning the hard way that the kind of energy you had doesn't come around twice. Because once a man finds his peace and detaches from needing her, his value skyrockets. You go from being her option to being her obsession. Not because you changed, but because you stopped trying. That's the paradox. The less you care, the more she does. If you want her to regret skipping your chapter, you don't chase her. You evolve past her. You build a life so full, so grounded, so focused, that she no longer fits in it. You let your success, your discipline, your peace become the story she can't stop reading from afar. Because women are drawn to men who create gravity. Men whose energy pulls them back, even when logic says they shouldn't care. Every late night thought she has, every time she compares her new reality to her old one, every quiet moment where her mind drifts back to you, that's gravity. And that gravity only gets stronger when you stop orbiting her world and start building your own. The reason she skipped your chapter wasn't because it was boring, it's because it was uncomfortable. You forced her to confront parts of herself she wasn't ready to fix. You saw her patterns before she did. You recognized her defense mechanisms. You didn't feed her ego, you challenged it. And when a woman isn't ready to evolve, she runs from the man who triggers her growth. She mistakes the discomfort of truth for the absence of love. That's why she'll always choose someone easier, someone who tells her what she wants to hear instead of what she needs to understand. But here's the thing, truth always outlasts comfort, and one day she'll realize that every man after you only reflected back the lesson she refused to learn with you. And when that day comes, she'll remember every detail. The tone of your voice when you spoke calmly during conflict, the way you didn't flinch when she tried to provoke you, the way you walked away instead of begging, the way you held eye contact like you could see straight through her act. Those small moments, the ones you thought she forgot, will come back to haunt her, because they weren't just behaviors, they were energy. Masculine, grounded, unmoved energy. And that's the kind that stays with a woman long after you're gone. It seeps into her thoughts, into her dreams, into her comparisons. She'll try to convince herself she's over you, but her subconscious will keep whispering otherwise, because you weren't just a chapter she skipped, you became the standard she'll never meet again. And here's what's truly poetic: when you stop chasing what you've lost, life starts giving you what you deserve. The moment you redirect all that emotional energy toward your growth, your path transforms. You become sharper, calmer, more magnetic. Opportunities that once seemed out of reach start finding you. People start respecting you more. Your aura changes. You no longer move like a man seeking validation. You move like a man who already has it. And that shift is what she'll feel most. Not your words, not your absence, but your transformation. Because every woman who skips a chapter like you eventually learns that the story never feels complete without the man who embodied peace in her chaos. So don't waste time trying to make her regret it. Don't try to make her see your worth. Just become the man who doesn't need to be seen to be remembered. Let her live in the story she chose, while you write the one you were destined for. Because real men don't chase closure, they create legacy. They let their progress, their calm, their detachment speak louder than any "I miss you" ever could. You were the chapter that could have healed her, evolved her, and shown her what love without control looks like. But she skipped it, and now, no matter how many pages she turns, every story after you will feel incomplete. Because once a woman has experienced a man like you, one who loved her without losing himself, every other chapter becomes just that filler. Over time, something strange happens inside her. The world starts feeling quieter, but not in a peaceful way. The same silence that used to feel liberating now feels heavy. She'll scroll through old photos, not to reminisce, but to feel something real again. She'll glance at your messages, not to reply, but to remember what being understood felt like. Because here's the truth, she didn't skip your chapter because it was dull. She skipped it because she didn't have the maturity to appreciate real love when it stood in front of her. You offered her patience when she wanted drama. You gave her depth when she was used to surface-level attention, and now that she's swimming in that shallow pool again, she finally realizes what depth truly felt like. You weren't just another man, you were a mirror, reflecting what she could have had if she didn't mistake peace for boredom. The regret that follows a woman who loses a grounded man isn't instant, it's progressive. It grows in silence, through comparisons, through patterns that keep repeating. Every man she dates after you will somehow disappoint her in the same way. Not because they're bad men, but because they're not you. They don't carry the same energy, the same composure, the same emotional weight. They don't know how to remain calm when tested, how to listen without judgment, how to lead without arrogance. And that's when it dawns on her. You weren't just a chapter she skipped, you were the lesson she keeps failing to learn. Every time she tries to replicate what you gave her, she gets further from it. Because what you offered wasn't performance, it was presence. And presence can't be replaced, it can only be remembered. She'll tell herself stories to cope. He wasn't ready, it wouldn't have worked. We were too different, but deep down, she knows those are just lies dressed as logic. The real reason she left was because you forced her to grow, and growth scares people who aren't ready for it. You challenged her comfort zone, held her accountable, and didn't let her emotional storms dictate the relationship. You refused to let her chaos control your peace, and because of that, she called you cold. But now that she's with men who chase, beg, and crumble, she realizes what cold really looks like. Cold is a man who doesn't care. You cared deeply. You just didn't lose yourself doing it. And that's what made you different. That's what made you unforgettable. Because you showed her what love looks like when it's disciplined. The beautiful irony is this. By skipping your chapter, she made you the ending she'll never stop rereading. You see, her mind won't let her move on completely. Every time she feels close to someone new, a small voice will whisper, "It's not the same." Because love, when it's real, imprints itself on the nervous system. The tone of your voice, the calm in your presence, the way you never reacted emotionally, it all becomes part of her subconscious memory. So when other men argue, shout, or act impulsively, her body remembers you, not as a fantasy, but as safety. That's the difference between attraction and attachment. Attraction fades, but emotional safety never does. And the moment she realizes no one else can replicate the emotional security you brought, that's when the regret turns into obsession. But this is where you must be careful. When she eventually comes back, and she will, in some form, it won't be because she suddenly found herself. It'll be because life finally humbled her. It'll be because she realized that her chase for excitement only led her back to emptiness. Don't mistake her return for love. It's reflection. It's the universe reminding you of your evolution. You've outgrown the version of yourself that needed her to validate your worth. Now, your silence, your success, and your inner peace are the validation. When she reaches out, you'll feel a calm detachment, not out of arrogance, but because you finally understand. You were never meant to be her lesson forever. You were meant to be her awakening. And once a man understands that, he doesn't go back. He moves forward with quiet gratitude for the pain that built him. Here's what most men don't realize. When you stop reacting, you start rewriting her story. Women are emotional by nature, and when they can no longer predict your response, they lose their power. She used to feel control through your attention, through your desire, through your reactions. But now, every time she tries to provoke a response and gets silence instead, it creates tension, the kind that lingers in her mind. Silence becomes your weapon, because silence creates imagination, and imagination is far louder than words. She starts wondering, has he moved on? Does he miss me? Is he with someone else? That uncertainty breaks her composure, and while she's overanalyzing, you're out there thriving, not out of revenge, but out of renewal. Your peace becomes punishment, not because you intend it, but because it highlights what she destroyed. Every post you make that shows growth, every project you complete, every smile you give, that doesn't include her. It all reinforces the reality she tried to escape. You're not the same man anymore. You've evolved into someone she can no longer reach, not because you're avoiding her, but because you've risen above her emotional frequency. That's when regret shifts from temporary to permanent, because now she's no longer missing the idea of you. She's missing the man you became because of losing her. The man who learned to channel heartbreak into evolution. The man who built something beautiful from the ruins of what she broke. And that's the ultimate paradox, man. The moment you let her go, she finally starts holding on. The moment you stop explaining, she starts overthinking. The moment you stop caring, she starts craving. Because women aren't drawn to weakness, they're drawn to grounded energy. And once you stop orbiting her emotions and start leading your life, she feels it on a level she can't describe. It's not anger, it's not jealousy, it's recognition. Recognition that she lost the one man who didn't need her validation to feel valuable. The one man who could have led her into peace, but instead had to walk away to protect his own. That's when she starts chasing ghosts, trying to find pieces of you in men who can't even understand what being you requires. So, when she looks back years later, she'll realize something that'll haunt her. You were the last genuine connection she ever had. The men who came after were temporary highs, fun distractions that faded quickly, but you were the quiet constant. The one who stayed calm when she was irrational, patient when she was emotional, and steady when everything else was chaos. That kind of energy doesn't vanish. It lingers. It rewires her memory. It becomes the standard she can't forget. And every time she feels the absence of that energy, she'll regret skipping the chapter that could have taught her everything about love, patience, loyalty, depth, and emotional balance. You became her missed opportunity for growth, and that's something no amount of closure or new love can erase. So let her go, not with bitterness, but with understanding. Let her feel the weight of her own decisions, while you rise into the man you were always meant to become. because her regret is not your responsibility, it's her reflection. You were the chapter she wasn't ready to read, the lesson she wasn't ready to learn, the man she wasn't ready to meet. But one day, when she's sitting in the silence of everything she chased, she'll realize the truth. She didn't lose you because you were too much. She lost you because she wasn't enough yet, and that realization will hit her not once, but for a lifetime. Meanwhile, you'll keep walking, calm, detached, complete, knowing that the story didn't end with her leaving. It began the moment you stopped waiting for her return. As time passes, her life will start to look full from the outside. New people, new hobbies, maybe even a relationship that seems perfect on paper. But internally, that hollow ache won't fade, because the human mind doesn't forget the person it felt the safest around. It tries to recreate that safety, to rebuild that peace, to find that same calm again, but it never works. Every time she laughs, it feels slightly forced. Every time she looks at a new partner, something feels missing, but she can't explain what. Because it's not about comparison, it's about energy. You had a stillness that made her heart feel steady. You had depth that made her chaos make sense. You had emotional control that anchored her instability. And now, every time she encounters someone new, she measures them subconsciously against that memory of you. That's what true regret feels like. Not crying over what's gone, but realizing that nothing else feels right anymore. She'll start to rationalize it, telling herself that it wasn't meant to be, that things happen for a reason, or that maybe one day it'll all make sense. But the truth is, she'll never really find peace in those words. Because what she's mourning isn't just you, it's the version of herself that existed when she was with you. The woman who could laugh freely, who felt seen, who could be emotional without judgment. You didn't just give her love, you gave her context. You showed her what being cherished actually felt like. And that kind of memory doesn't fade with time. It deepens, it matures into longing, it evolves into reflection. And as her life continues to move forward, every little piece of happiness will be shadowed by the quiet thought that she once had something extraordinary, and she let it slip away because she wasn't emotionally ready to handle it. You, on the other hand, have evolved far beyond that chapter. You no longer see her as the one who hurt you. You see her as the catalyst that awakened you. Her betrayal, her absence, her silence, they all served a purpose. They broke your illusions, burned away your naivety, and forged the man you were always meant to be. You learned emotional detachment, not from reading self-help books, but from surviving her inconsistency. You learned self-respect, not by choice, but by necessity. You learn peace by realizing that no amount of love can fix someone who's addicted to chaos. Now, your life revolves around discipline, ambition, and calm energy. You don't chase women anymore, you attract respect. You don't argue anymore, you observe. And the same woman who once thought she could do better now watches from afar, wondering how she lost a man who turned pain into purpose and rejection into rebirth. There's a quiet power in that transformation, the kind of power that doesn't roar but resonates. Because now, you've become the story she tells herself to fall asleep at night. She'll think about you randomly, during moments of loneliness, during small arguments with her new partner, during nostalgic songs that used to remind her of you. But this time, the thought won't bring comfort, it'll bring pain. Because every reminder of you highlights the distance between who she was with you and who she's become since. You represented something she can't recreate: authenticity. You were emotionally masculine, steady, grounded, and unbothered by her emotional storms. And once a woman experiences that kind of presence, every other man feels emotionally weaker in comparison. That's the punishment she unknowingly gave herself, being haunted by the man she tried to replace but never truly could. And while she's living in her loop of comparison and regret, you're walking in silence, not bitter, not nostalgic, just at peace. Because you've realized something that changes everything. Not every connection is meant to last, but every connection is meant to teach. And she taught you the most valuable lesson of all, that your energy is sacred, that giving too much of yourself to someone who doesn't respect it isn't love, it's self-abandonment. You don't need closure from her because you've already closed the emotional door yourself. You don't need revenge because your peace is revenge enough. And the more you stay silent, the louder your absence becomes. She'll scroll through your social media, hoping to find the version of you she remembers, but he's gone. You've evolved into something untouchable. She wanted attention, now she craves access. but that's the one thing she'll never get again. Years later, when she looks back at her life, she'll remember you as the man who made her feel most alive, not because of chaos, but because of calm. She'll remember your patience when she was emotional, your strength when she tested you, your distance when she pushed too far. She'll remember that no matter how much she tried to provoke you, you never folded, and that memory will sting, because it represents the kind of man she prays she could find again. One who didn't need to be loud to command respect, one who didn't need to beg to be understood, one who loved with clarity, not confusion. Every relationship she enters after you will feel temporary. Every man she dates will feel incomplete, because she'll keep searching for pieces of you in people who don't have the depth to hold them. That's not punishment, that's karma, the emotional echo of a love she took for granted. But the greatest part of this story isn't her regret, it's your rebirth. Because what started as heartbreak became your initiation into manhood. You no longer chase external validation because you've learned to find it within. You no longer need to prove your worth because you know your worth. You've realized that emotional control is the highest form of power, not because it suppresses feelings, but because it prevents chaos from leading your life. And the beauty of that transformation is that it makes you immune to manipulation. The very games she once used to control you now have no effect. You've stepped out of the emotional arena completely. You're not fighting for love anymore, you're living in alignment. And that kind of man doesn't attract temporary flings. He attracts respect, admiration, and peace. You've become the man every woman secretly desires, but few are ready to handle. In the stillness of your solitude, you found something she'll spend her whole life chasing: fulfillment. Not the kind that comes from attention or external validation, but the kind that grows from purpose. You've built your routines, guarded your energy, and mastered the art of being alone without being lonely. You've learned to enjoy silence, to find strength in discipline, to find satisfaction in small victories. You no longer need love to feel alive, you are alive. And ironically, that's when women start noticing you again. Not because you're trying to impress them, but because your energy has shifted. You radiate control, focus, and quiet confidence. You no longer seek affection, you inspire it. And somewhere out there, she's watching, realizing that the man she once overlooked has become everything she now wishes she could have. But that door has closed, and it's the finality of that truth that keeps her up at night. By now, she's learned that not all losses are visible. Some are emotional, some are spiritual, some echo silently in the background of every happy moment she posts online. Because even when she's smiling, even when she's surrounded by people, there's a part of her that feels incomplete, like she left a piece of her soul in a story she never finished reading. And that's the part that will always belong to you. Not because you own her, but because you awakened her. You were the mirror that showed her who she could have become if only she had stayed. And no matter how many years pass, that truth will remain carved in her memory. She'll love again, she'll laugh again, but deep down, she'll always wonder, what if I hadn't skipped that chapter? That's not a question she'll ever get to answer, because the man who once waited for her to understand the story moved on and wrote a better one. So if you ever think back to her, do it without anger, because her regret is her burden, not your responsibility. You were never meant to be her forever. You were meant to be her awakening. You were the chapter that forced her to confront her own emotional immaturity. You were the lesson life gave her before she was ready to learn it. And while she'll spend years trying to rewrite the ending, you'll keep writing new beginnings. You'll keep rising, building, and leading with quiet strength. Because that's what real men do. They evolve. They don't chase closure, they become it. And the day she finally realizes what she lost, when she finally understands who you truly were, you'll already be long gone. Not bitter, not broken, just free. Knowing that sometimes, being the chapter she regrets skipping isn't a tragedy. It's a blessing disguised as loss. As the years stretch on, her regret doesn't fade, it evolves. It matures like an ache that learns to live inside her without ever leaving. You'll cross her mind in unexpected ways, while she's stuck in traffic, when a certain song plays, or when someone mirrors your tone or patience for a fleeting second. That's when the ghost of you comes back, not in body, but in energy. Because your absence wasn't quiet, it was defining. It marked the point in her life where she unknowingly crossed from innocence into awareness. Before you, she thought she understood love. After you, she realized she only understood attention. You weren't a phase, you were the revelation. And that's what haunts her now, not that you left, but that you never had to come back, that you found peace in the same silence that used to terrify her. And now, every peaceful man she meets reminds her of what she couldn't hold on to when it mattered. There's something almost poetic about it. You see, when you were trying to hold things together, she mistook your consistency for complacency. She thought stability was dull because her mind was addicted to chaos. But now, as life humbles her through disappointment, betrayal, and failed connections, she starts craving the same boredom she once ran from. That's how emotional maturity often arrives too late. Now, when she meets men who make her laugh but not think, who make her feel but not evolve, she starts to understand the difference between excitement and depth. And that understanding cuts deep because it reveals something she didn't want to admit. You were the upgrade she wasn't ready for. You weren't just another man, you were the next level of emotional awareness. And once someone skips a level in their journey, life keeps sending them the same lessons in new faces until they finally learn it. Meanwhile, your silence has become sacred. It's no longer about ignoring her, it's about preserving your peace. You've learned that not everything deserves a reaction, that not every loss needs to be mourned, that not every woman deserves your emotional investment. You now move differently. You observe before you engage. You lead without explaining. You love without attachment. You stop trying to prove your worth to people who can't even recognize value when it's in front of them. That evolution isn't loud or dramatic. It's subtle, calm, unstoppable. And that's what makes it so intimidating. Because when a man reaches that level of detachment, he becomes unshakable. The world can tempt him, test him, or mock him, but he doesn't move. He simply exists in his strength. And that kind of composure, that mastery of self, is something she'll never forget. Because it's the exact opposite of what every other man became after her. Emotional, reactive, needy, predictable. What she once labeled as cold, she now sees as calm. What she thought was indifference was actually emotional discipline. What she mistook for disinterest was self-respect. The same traits she once criticized are now the ones she silently admires from afar. She'll try to find a man like you again, but she'll discover something brutal. The qualities she desires now are the same ones she used to destroy. Because women often learn through contrast. They appreciate depth only after drowning in superficiality. And now, when she meets men who are too eager, too emotional, too desperate for validation, she'll long for your quiet confidence. When others react, you reflected. When others chased, you withdrew. When others explained, you remained silent. That's what separates men who are driven by emotion from men who are defined by control. And once a woman experiences that difference, she can never go back to chaos without knowing it's chaos. By now, she's reached a stage where she doesn't even talk about you anymore. Not because she's over it, but because the story hurts too much to retell. She doesn't want to sound foolish, admitting that the one man who never begged for her attention ended up being the only one she can't forget. She might still tell her friends that it wasn't meant to be, but her eyes will give her away. There's a softness there, a quiet sorrow mixed with guilt, because deep down, she knows she could have had something real if only she had been ready for it. But women who crave attention always lose to men who seek peace. And you, in your quiet ascension, have become proof that peace always wins in the long run. You didn't win through revenge or ego. You won through evolution. You became everything she thought she wanted, but by the time she realized it, you no longer needed her recognition. Your growth has now made her reflection painful. Every time she looks in the mirror, she sees the woman who underestimated a man's worth. Every time she gets ignored by someone she desires, she's reminded of how she once treated you. Every time she tries to play the same emotional games that used to work, they fail, because the energy she's projecting is now different. Life has a strange way of teaching humility. It gives you exactly what you gave others. So while she used to enjoy watching you care too much, she now finds herself in that position, overthinking texts, rereading old messages, watching someone else ignore her with the same calmness you once did. That's not karma in the mystical sense, it's just energy returning home. The same emotional imbalance she caused in you is now living inside her. And the most painful part? The man who once suffered from it has moved far beyond her reach. You've reached a point where her existence doesn't affect you anymore. Not because you've forgotten, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself that needed closure. You don't hate her, you don't pity her, you simply see her. You see the immaturity behind her games, the insecurity behind her distance, the fear behind her arrogance. And once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. It's not personal anymore, it's psychological. She wasn't evil, she was unhealed, she wasn't cruel, she was lost. And you were never her enemy, you were her mirror. That realization frees you, because the moment you stop taking her behavior personally, you detach emotionally, you stop trying to rewrite the story, you stop replaying the memories, you stop asking why. You simply accept that her exit wasn't a rejection, it was divine redirection. She was never meant to complete you, she was meant to awaken you. And now, as you walk through life, women can sense it, that quiet authority, that emotional maturity, that depth that comes from surviving heartbreak without losing your heart. You no longer need to convince anyone of your value. You've become the man whose energy speaks before he does. The man who doesn't chase, doesn't explain, doesn't fold. And that's magnetic, because the more grounded you become, the more women are drawn to you, but not in the same way. Now, it's not your attention they want, it's your energy, but you guard it wisely. You've learned that love is not about losing yourself in someone else. It's about sharing peace with someone who's already found theirs. That realization changes the way you live, the way you love, the way you lead. You're not afraid of being alone anymore, because solitude is no longer loneliness, it's luxury. One day she'll see you again, maybe in passing, maybe online, maybe through someone's story, and for a moment, time will stop. She'll notice the calmness in your face, the glow of a man who has mastered detachment. You won't need to say a word. Your eyes will say it all. I forgave you, but I outgrew you. And that will sting more than any insult, more than any argument. Because she'll finally understand that losing you wasn't a breakup, it was an ending. The end of being seen through truth. The end of being loved without conditions. The end of being accepted despite flaws. She'll smile politely, maybe even say hello. But deep down, she'll know she's no longer part of your story. You've closed that chapter, not out of spite, but out of strength. And the peace on your face will be the reminder she can never erase the one she skipped, became the one she'll never surpass. So remember this, her regret is not your validation, your evolution is. You were never meant to stay where you were, emotionally diminished. You were meant to rise, to rebuild, to rediscover yourself in the silence she left behind. Because the truth is, the universe doesn't take people from your life to punish you. It removes them to prepare you. You had to lose her to find yourself. You had to be misunderstood to master understanding. You had to be left behind to learn how to move forward alone. And now that you've done that, you've become the kind of man who no longer waits to be loved. You are love. Calm, disciplined, intentional, unshakable. You are proof that heartbreak doesn't destroy real men, it forges them. And as for her, she'll spend a lifetime realizing that the chapter she skipped was the one that could have healed her story forever. Eventually, you'll realize that all of this, the love, the loss, the confusion, was never about her at all. It was about you, about the kind of man you were meant to become through the pain. You were too soft once, too forgiving, too quick to see potential where there was only pattern. You believed that love could fix immaturity, that loyalty could heal chaos, that your effort could awaken appreciation. But love doesn't work that way. It's not about how much you give, it's about who you give it to. And sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is walking away from the person you wanted most. Because the woman you once saw as your dream was really your mirror, showing you every place you needed boundaries, every area where you lacked control. And once you learn that, her absence stops hurting. It starts making sense. You stop wishing things were different because you understand now they were necessary. Her chapter in your life was a fire, a painful one, but you needed it. You needed to burn through illusion, through attachment, through the fantasy that someone else could complete you. That pain stripped you down to your core and forced you to meet yourself for the first time. You learned that solitude doesn't mean being alone, it means being whole. You learned that love without self-respect isn't love, it's dependency. And you learn that emotional control isn't about suppressing feelings, it's about mastering your reactions. You're no longer the man who seeks validation from women. You're the man who validates himself through purpose. That shift changes everything. The world starts reacting to you differently. People respect you more. Women approach you differently. And life itself opens doors that chaos once kept shut. Because you've stopped moving from desperation, you move from direction now. The beauty of your evolution is that it doesn't demand recognition. You don't post about it, you don't talk about it, you embody it. Your silence has become your loudest statement. When she checks your profile and sees no traces of the man who once sought her attention, she feels that loss deeply. Not because she misses the attention, but because she misses the emotional gravity you carried. You once made her feel secure in ways words couldn't describe, and now that energy is gone, she feels its absence like oxygen leaving the room. And here's the truth. Most people don't miss you because they love you. They miss you because your absence forces them to confront their own emptiness. That's exactly what's happening to her now. You're no longer her comfort, you're her consequence. The version of you that once begged for love has been replaced by a version that commands it without effort. And when she finally understands that, she'll try to find her way back, not out of love, but out of memory. Because time doesn't heal regret, it amplifies it. She'll start to realize that the peace she once found in your presence wasn't ordinary, it was rare. That the way you listened, the way you stayed calm when she pushed your buttons, the way you never tried to impress, but always impressed anyway, those things weren't replaceable. They were foundational. You didn't just give her moments, you gave her stability. And when she tries to return, she'll expect the same version of you, the man who used to care, to worry, to wait. But that man no longer exists. He died in the silence she left behind. What remains now is someone more refined, more aware, more deliberate. You no longer chase what you once craved, because you've learned something she never did. Real peace feels better than temporary affection. So when she calls or texts someday, don't see it as validation. See it as confirmation. Confirmation that you healed correctly, that your silence spoke louder than any argument could. Because women always come back to the energy they couldn't control. It's not always about wanting you, it's about wanting the power they once had over you. But when she reaches out and finds no reaction, no emotion, no need to explain, that's when she realizes her chapter is truly over. You've closed it, not out of bitterness, but out of awareness. You understand now that some people enter your life not to stay, but to show you what to stop accepting. And her leaving taught you more than her loving ever could. She taught you patience, detachment, discernment. She taught you that love without respect is a slow death, and that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And as you continue forward, something magical happens. You stop seeking love and start attracting it, but not the kind that drains or confuses you. The kind that feels peaceful, reciprocal, and grounded. Because you've changed the kind of energy you emit. You no longer vibrate on desperation or longing. You vibrate on presence. You walk into a room and people feel your calm before you even speak. You've become a man of stillness, of focus, of quiet intensity. That's the energy that moves mountains. That's the energy women sense but can't manipulate. And ironically, it's that same energy that will one day attract a woman who doesn't play games because she doesn't need to. She'll be healed, centered, feminine in the truest sense. She won't compete with your peace, she'll protect it. And when that happens, you'll realize that losing the wrong woman was the price you had to pay to meet the right one. But here's the part that's hardest for most men to accept. Sometimes, the story doesn't end with a new woman. Sometimes, it ends with you. Because wholeness doesn't always mean finding someone else. Sometimes, it means learning to sit with yourself and feel no absence. You wake up one day, look in the mirror, and realize that you no longer crave validation, no longer replay memories, no longer seek closure. You just exist, and that's enough. You've built a life so fulfilling that love becomes a bonus, not a necessity. You've reached the stage of masculine peace that most never attain, where solitude feels like serenity, not punishment. That's when you truly understand power. Not dominance, not ego, but peace. Because nothing is more powerful than a man who doesn't need anyone to feel whole. Meanwhile, she'll keep searching for that feeling she once had with you. Security without suffocation, passion without pain, connection without confusion. But every attempt will fall short because you weren't just a man, you were a state of energy she's no longer aligned with. And that's the tragedy of emotional immaturity. It recognizes value only after it's gone. Her regret won't fade. It'll follow her through every almost relationship, every night she can't sleep, every quiet moment when life slows down enough for reflection to whisper the truth. She'll remember your patience when others lose their temper. She'll remember your silence when others argue. She'll remember your peace when others panic. You'll become the emotional benchmark she compares everyone to, and no one will ever measure up. That's the curse of losing a man who loved without attachment and led without fear. So now, as you look back, don't wish it had gone differently. Every heartbreak carved you into who you are now, a man who understands his value, his boundaries, his mission. You've outgrown the version of yourself that thought love meant sacrifice. You've learned that true love is not about losing yourself to prove your worth. It's about being yourself so powerfully that others rise to meet you. You don't chase anymore because you understand that what's meant for you will meet you halfway. And when you live from that truth, your energy becomes magnetic. You attract opportunities, success, and people who align with your purpose. That's what happens when you master detachment. Not because you stopped feeling, but because you finally learned how to feel without falling apart. So let her remember you, let her regret, let her replay the story 1,000 times in her mind, trying to understand how she lost you. Because the answer is simple. She wasn't ready for a man who didn't need saving. You were never meant to be her forever. You were meant to be her awakening, and awakenings are never comfortable. They're life-changing. You were the mirror that showed her what love could be when it's pure, disciplined, and masculine. And while she may never admit it out loud, you'll always be the quiet ghost in the back of her mind, the one she can't replace, the one she shouldn't have left, the one she'll never forget. Meanwhile, you'll move forward with grace, knowing that losing her wasn't a loss. It was the universe's way of reminding you that peace, purpose, and power will always be worth more than her presence.